Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete for Exciting. My guest today is a clinical psychologist with 35 years of experience helping people break free from trauma. He's also the co-author of the Reenact, Break the Behavior Patterns That Keep You Stuck in Trauma in Everyday Life. The one, the only Tony Yetzi. Tony, how you doing, man?
Good, good.
So, Tony, why don't you tell everybody a little more about yourself? I mean, 35 years is a lot of experience, so why don't you let us know a little bit about it?
Yeah, I did my graduate studies at the University of Georgia,
Okay.
and so that kind of gave me an experience. And in terms of trauma, the first population I worked with were Vietnam vets,
Mm-hmm.
and that laid the foundation for my work down the road. I came back to Canada. I'm originally from Montreal.
Oh, okay.
And I'm now in London, Ontario, not England, Ontario, which is a city between Detroit and Toronto.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm at a large medical complex, and for many years I worked in what we call the behavioral medicine service.
Yeah.
So I would see patients with medical problems, but they had to cope, they had to deal with things. And so the job was to teach them how to deal with those medical conditions. And there was a lot of exposure to patients who had experiences of being traumatized
Mm-hmm.
by medical interventions.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also a lot of experience of people being traumatized way before they ever got to the hospital, and it became clear that that was as much of a problem as anything else. And so that continued. And in the last 5 years, I got switched to the bariatric surgery program. And so I see these patients who are being considered for a procedure to correct the amount of weight that they have. They live with overweight. Again, this is a population that has a lot of comorbid physical and psychological conditions before they got to this point.
Yeah.
And after they become overweight and deal with all kinds of other things, they deal with a ton of other medical, physical, and psychological conditions that just complicates the whole picture. So I've become accustomed to dealing with these complex cases that looks at the beginning and at the end, and we try to and we'll talk a bit more as this podcast goes in terms of how we try to specifically identify this issue.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Wow, man. You went to one polar extreme to the other, man. Like, talk about trauma. Like Vietnam. Holy crap, man. There was a book in high school I read, I can remember. It's called Voices of Vietnam, where there were actual letters that people were sending home.
Yeah.
And the things these gentlemen were telling them is just like, I just, wow, hats off to them, because it was horrifying. The one I can remember that stuck out the most was the guy that had unfortunately had to take somebody's life, and he was describing the whole moment. Like, there was no filter, Tony. There was just complete, like, you're reading the full actual letter this man wrote. He's like, I had to do this, and then he's like, he was in a fight. It was a fight for his life at that point, because he said when he had taken the butt of the gun, and he crushed the guy's skull, but he started whistling real loud, so he just had to keep going. And you could tell he wasn't all right with it. You could just read in the writing and feel that he was just not okay, man. But that's crazy, though.
The interesting thing that occurred that summer in New Orleans when I saw all these vets, clearly they were affected by the war. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree. It was a horrible experience. But I interviewed about 50 of them, and I was overwhelmed by how many of them were messed up before they ever got to Vietnam.
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, so they had problems. They had parents who had, criminal history, mental health history, legal history. They were mistreated as kids, and so, but people didn't really recognize that. So they saw it just as war-related. Of course, that had a significant impact, but the war ends up being one big trauma laid on top of
everything
all
else
these
you
other
already dealt
traumas.
with. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a bit like a big forest fire. You water it all, but if you leave
I love the analogy.
one little ember, what happens?
It keeps going.
It'll just light up again. And this is what happens if you take care of one PTSD, one trauma, and you leave all the other ones. Then they're in trouble. They're still having difficulties.
No, I agree, though. I think that's a really good point, that we looked at it as just shell shock and everything else, but we didn't look at the root causes, like how many of these guys had issues prior to that, terrible childhoods and all the things. I think that's great, though, that you were doing that, though, because, you found that out, though. But it's just like, I don't think a lot of people think of it that way, though, honestly. I think they just think of the war in general. They don't think of how many people before leaving for war had problems, and then the war amplified the problem even worse, and it's just... Man.
But remember, you didn't send soldiers over, not for Vietnam War.
Mm-mm.
You sent people that were conscripted, and it included the people who weren't able to dodge.
Yeah.
And so it had all kinds of politics that were wrong from the get-go.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. I agree 100% with you on that one, though. So now, we go from there. We go all the way to where you're now, which I think is interesting, though, because um, in that category where you're now, with the bariatric stuff, I think, body dysmorphia is one of the things that people automatically can think of. Are there some other mental health disorders that have to do with that, like the body shaming that, people that don't think about anything related to those kind of stuff that you run into?
Well, I mean, as a society, we're very image focused
Yeah,
and
we are.
conscious, So this whole thing we got going with Ozempic
Hmm.
and all those medications that take care of weight loss, and again, that's going to be another mess later down the road, when the information catches up as to what the consequences of all that are going to be.
Yeah.
But, the new fad now is if you're a guy and you're 5'4" and you want 6 more inches, you go get those extensions on your, like it is crazy. So in terms of body image, there are a lot of conditions but in this context, honestly, that's like not even the biggest problem.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is depression and
Hmm.
anxiety.
Hmm.
The biggest problem is, relationships that suck. The biggest problem is hard to work,
Hmm.
hard to survive and be independent, and so all these things are all part of the broth that these people present with.
Yeah, and same thing too. You can group bodybuilders into that too. Those guys have body
Yeah,
image
yeah,
issues. They
yeah.
do like, oh, you always see those movies where they make jokes like, oh, you look, or was it the one I think of most is the one with the comedy about dodgeball. Remember the two where he goes, "Hey, White, you look fat." That psychology that White goes into, he gets angry. That happens every day for people. Though that's what people see. Like they have these false images because the internet is posting all these like sexualizing images of females and males, looking good, and it's like this is what you need to look like to be happy, and it's not what you have to look to be happy.
But the problem is we mess around with that presentation on the surface like that's the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the real problem.
Okay. Okay.
Right? It's so for example, when people live with overweight, they come because they're overweight and they want some help. The problem is not that they're overweight. The problem is their overweight is a symptom of problems. You
Okay. Okay.
follow?
Yeah, I'm following you. Yep.
It's due to
It's a
other
pattern.
things.
It's a
It's a
pattern. Okay,
pattern.
get
That's
you. I'm
right.
following you.
It's
Okay.
a pattern. And that's the reenactment piece. So you reenact the pattern over
You're
and
right.
over.
Okay.
So for example, someone comes into your office and they're overweight and I want surgery, the problem might be that they were called stupid and fat
Yeah.
from when the age of 5. And they were tortured by their peers. The problem is that if this is I hate to say it, I'm an old fart watching the end of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Have you been watching the
Yeah.
episodes?
I've been watching it. Yeah.
So what do we have? A chubby kid with
Yep.
glasses who looks like the nerd, who everybody hates. These experiences just profoundly mark a person.
Yeah.
And then they go on later and it affects dating. It affects, where they work. They're not treated the same.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know
definitely.
that. People who are overweight are treated differently and society is basically mean to them. But a lot of other problems in life. So these guys who come in, and they're bodybuilding, you have beautiful people who end up with lips 3 times the size. There was
Yes.
nothing wrong with the lips before.
Yeah.
But
What I'm thinking about though is you remember the girl from Saved by the Bell, the girl Lisa played Lisa. Like she had all that plastic surgery, and it's just like, oh my God, she was a beautiful girl when she was younger, and then
that's
all of a
right.
sudden now it's like, what the heck happened? Another one, if you want to, anybody for the newer generation, y'all should remember The Hills with Heidi. Remember how she was a beautiful young lady? Now she looks like a freakish Barbie doll kind of look because it's like she had those self-image issues and things like that. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? But it proves that,
Exactly.
it could be anybody. Like I was a chubby kid and I remember that too. And I know Hulk Hogan had the same thing in his backstory. He was a hefty kid when he was younger because when he told his story, the same thing, the professional wrestler, that's when he got into bodybuilding because he was like tired of getting picked on by all these kids, but he was always a chubby kid too, And it's always something, the root cause of something that it's causing that issue though.
So you have to remember that whatever a person comes through the door into an office and they say this is the problem, it's rarely the problem.
Exactly.
It's all these other things And those are problems,
Yeah.
and even what they bring in is a problem, but it's really not the main problem. And so what you have to do with people is figure out what their story is, what the origins of their problems are, and then try to come up with something to change that.
Tony, I'd love to have your job, honestly, just because I'd be so fascinated by people in general, just their stories. Like, I get to do it every day on this podcast, get to hear like your stories and things like that, but just people's stories in general have to be interesting of the things that they go through, and it always relates to, you don't know what people go through every single day, though. So I always tell people to be kind to everybody when I sign off this show, because it's like, it really what it is. You don't know what people go through on a daily basis, so it's interesting. And I love what you're doing, man. Honestly, I do. I love how you're going to looking for the root cause, because I think that your job's really important, because you're like, okay, I understand you want this surgery, but let's make sure this is exactly what it is, the reason that you're doing this for all the right reasons, not the wrong
Okay.
reasons.
So let me explain here.
Okay.
One more.
Go ahead, Red.
I go to University of Georgia. I learn how to do what's called exposure-based treatment.
Okay.
When someone has a trauma, you expose them to what they're scared of.
Okay.
And you start from the least anxious to the most anxious. Okay. So we would treat people, who had PTSD, and good. They recovered and they went about their lives. Then they come back 2-3 years later and they're like, I don't know what's going on. I bumped into someone at the mall and I lost it. I just lost it. My PTSD just
Yeah.
lit up.
Yeah.
And so being bumped into the mall is not the same thing as the original trauma being in a car
Right.
accident. However, there are themes in the being bumped into at the mall
All right.
that connect to the accident. And so what we need to start to work on is recognizing what the themes are and treat the themes. So it's the roots. The themes are the roots.
Yeah.
So I think you know this.
Yeah.
If I have a tumor here and I lop it off the top of the arm, are we good?
No,
Why?
because the roots are still there.
Bravo.
I could run.
This is exactly the same thing psychologically.
Yeah.
Is it this? No, you left the roots. You have to go and get to the roots.
Right, exactly. No, I can relate to that, though, because with my trauma was I was 10, my mom abandoned me. So anytime a situation feels similar to that, I go back to that. You know what I'm saying? And I realized that when I started doing the show and I started learning little by little about myself and trauma and all these other things, and I started discovering these different areas why I invited different guests on to talk about these things. I've been doing a self-reflection this past few months of things that I've gone through, that realizing that instead of blaming everybody else for these problems, what was my part in that situation? And then taking my own faults and accepting the faults of what I did. It was hard, though, but it's not easy. Like you said, you just got to go to what that root cause was. Like, what did I have to play in that part, kind of thing. So
Well said. Abandonment is one of the most common
yeah.
triggers, one of the most common triggers of an emotional reaction, because it's so core,
Mm-hmm.
And so what kind of drives people a bit batty is they know they have issues with abandonment. They may not recognize that you're supposed to have a meeting and your friend doesn't show up, doesn't say anything. You
Yep.
could be triggered by abandonment.
Yep.
It's a nothing moment, but your sensitivity to the theme in that moment is high.
Yeah, that's what happens for me here too with podcasts. When people don't show up, I get a little upset. But now I'm learning to be just like, it is what it is at this point. People don't make it, people don't make it. And it was early on, it was hard too, and like rejection was hard too. But that's one of the things you have to learn with this gig. You invite so many people to come on here. Some people are just not okay to talk about it. And and things like that too. And it's like hearing no was hard at first, but now it's like, okay, all right, move on to the next one. There's so many people that want to be on here, that the demand is high enough, and I had to learn to accept no as an answer, as well. But, I get the abandonment thing. Like I said, that was
But the
just
cool
like,
part, it's not just no, is that you're okay with you.
mhm,
That's the key thing. All right. And because of our sensitivities, we end up making things that actually have sometimes little to do with us,
yeah,
and we make them part of ourselves. And so we can't change what the world is doing,
exactly.
but you can change how you cope and
Ex-
react to things. So that's a cool attitude now, where you go, it's got nothing to do with me. Stuff happens. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
adapted to that mentality though, because that's just like, it's just because in the when you invite guests on, people have things that come up, and then you find out something happened. And it's like, I always assume that's the next thing. I'm thinking, okay, something happened. That's my first go-to. Before it wasn't like this, like, oh, whatever, this person jaded me, you know what I mean? But now it's like, okay, something had to happen that this person wasn't here. Lo and behold, 90% of the time, that's what it is. Hey, I had something come up, and I'm very understanding too when it comes. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what happens, now it's like it happens. Before it was like, no, you wasted my time, it's like that's what you want to respond, but you can't. You can't do that because that doesn't make sense. Like life happens, and then things just happen. You can't control everything. Like the things I've been going through the last few months, I've missed some appointments with people, and people are very understanding. Nobody's going to win at the end of the day, and everybody's going to be upset over what. And then you guys think about what it was you got mad about. And you both look like fools at the end of the day because you all got mad over the smallest thing. It could just be a small thing that happened, like a miscommunication. Okay, well, I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? Things like that. And another person just wants to be rude. Don't let that person affect your day. Like, I had to learn that too. Like with customer service, is a great training for that. It's like you deal with these people on a daily basis at a fast pace. You're going to run into somebody that's just having a sour day, man. It's you just being nice to them. You can make their day and you don't even realize it. They'll come back and see you. A lot of people come back and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I was rude the other day. I wasn't having a great day. And I'm just like, I've already passed it, honestly. I'm just not even worried about it. Like, it happens. I understand. We all go through things every day. We have rough days. I have rough days. There's days where I don't like talking to people, but, I come and do the show anyways, and it makes my day
Yeah.
because I meet awesome people like you. I meet great people that have great conversations and things like that too. So it's like, it's hard, but it's been a linear experience. And it's different for me because I'm on this podcast. So people are watching this as Pete's evolving and these different things I start reflecting on because I'm a very open person when it comes to things now. Before, not so much because I wasn't ready, but now that I've had this experience, I've had these conversations with people, I keep hearing everybody's stories. It's like, it's time for me to share mine. So now I've been, revealing mine a little by little, and it feels good to let it go and tell people your story and things like that.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. That's the gutsy thing. I was going to say, you podcasters, there's a bunch of people out there doing their shows with incredible courage, and talking about, really difficult things.
yeah.
And just doing it is part of the therapy, if you want. It's part of working through whatever all this stuff is about.
Yeah.
You said something earlier that I just wanted to sort of comment.
Mm-hmm.
The power of stories is really important. And the thing is, generally, we never know the whole story about people and things. And when you finally know the whole story, most of the time people will go, no wonder.
Right.
Okay, I get it. Even our psychopaths, even our people who go on and kill 13 people, and
Yeah.
you hear their backstory and you go, oh, Jesus, no wonder.
Yeah.
There's usually a good reason. It's just that we don't know the whole story. And I think that's what we want to learn to do a little better and getting to understand each other is recognize there's a deeper, larger story in understanding each other.
Yeah, and things I do now too. It's funny that I realize I sit there and analyze things like anything that has related to mental health. Like, say, the Dallas Cowboys is the most recent one I can think of. The young gentleman that was 24 and unfortunately we lost.
Yes.
I remember the one thing that sticks out in the interviews. The girlfriend said that he had severe mental health issues. So my next follow-up question would have been: okay, so were you getting him some help? If you knew he was struggling, he was dealing with the loss of his mom. He's had grief on top of all that he's dealing with. What were you doing to help him? Like, the team obviously would have done whatever they needed to. I can guarantee they would have done. They're not going to allow that to go by the wayside if they knew that he was struggling that bad. But if you knew he was struggling, what were you doing to help him? And that's just my first jump to everything. Everything's like, okay, when everybody blames mental health, I'm like, okay, so what led up to these events? Was this person struggling and we didn't see it? Or did you all see these posts, like people posting on the internet crazy things, and you're just saying, oh, they're just that, crazy things. And you're not thinking about, okay, hey, is this person there's something wrong, and not reaching out and ask him, hey, is everything okay? Things like that. Start investigating a little further, because what the Dallas Cowboys thing to me was like, that's the one thing that stuck out to me, is that she just said that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So what were you doing for him? That's great that you can cite that's what his issues were. So, okay, so then what were you doing for him is what my first thought was, but that's just because that's what I do. I do mental health. I'm always fascinated to know what people are doing about these situations. It's great. You can cite that, blame that. You can blame it all day, but what are you doing to help these people's mental health situations?
No, but I think even beyond that, though, Pete, there's a reality
Mm-hmm.
that you don't know
Exactly.
who's going to go and cross the line.
Exactly.
Sometimes you're aware of lots of things, but people are shocked on the other side when that line's crossed and go, I really didn't see that coming. And
That's
if someone's
exactly
decided,
right.
and if someone's decided, it's hard to, and I don't say that as a give up kind of strategy.
No.
I say that as just a reality that has to be understood. But what you're talking about is, it is just so easy when you want to make sense of chaos.
Yeah.
Everyone makes sense of nonsense. You want to find something that explains something. Mental health
I think it's a cop out.
is the easiest thing to do is to acknowledge that.
And to touch on
It's not a
Tony.
cop out. I don't think of that as a
Oh,
cop
okay,
out.
okay. All right, I respect it. Listen, I respect it because you've been with this about night, but I accept that. Okay, my point I want to comment to though is what you said was where they said that they didn't see it coming. That's always said when it comes to suicide. Is the first thing I think of. Well, I didn't see that coming. You don't see it's coming. That's the point. You don't see it's coming because even if this person had told you, they still have that thought in their mind. Like you may not be able to stop them regardless of what you say. So whenever you see all the signs to look for, okay, well you could look for these signs. You may see these signs. You may not see these signs. Especially when it comes to that topic, and then everybody gets so like sensitive when you talk about it, but it's a real thing that's happening. Like, let's look at the statistics of men that have committed suicides. 80% of us, that's a huge number, like, of people that are doing it that we're not talking about enough. And then everybody gets real sensitive when it comes up. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but at the same time, like, obviously it's a glaring issue that we need to handle.
Yep. One of the problems with mental health,
Mm-hmm.
because it's such a thing that people are just not comfortable being open about, and so all the education around being open about mental health stuff is extremely important,
Mm-hmm.
but in spite of its importance, hospitals and other places pay lip service and talk about helping, but they're not really doing enough. So you
Yeah.
just identified a particular group that's really vulnerable. The guys are not the ones who are going to be out in the street talking about, stuff. So I
No, I
think
agree.
this is something that's good. That this show is an opportunity to bring attention to that
Definitely.
and to normalize that. To
Yeah,
normalize
definitely.
that.
That's the idea, though. Is I'm trying to normalize it and give them that safe space where they can come in and they're not judged, And I was doing live recordings at first, which were great at first, and then I realized that I want to keep this personal because that way, when I invite somebody in here, it's an intimate setting. It's Pete and you. That's it. Nobody else. Unless you need somebody here, there's options that we can have people off the camera that could either be your support system. You need them. That way, you have them there. We can make those kind of arrangements, and then whenever I get into any kind of conversations like suicide or sexual assault, I always tell them the same exact things. And listen, if we touch something you don't want to talk about, let me know. If there's something that we need to stay away from, let me know right now that we can stay away from it. I'm very understanding. I lay those guidelines out. I said, if there's something that triggers you in the middle of the conversation and you need a break, and I see you getting upset, I'll cut in, I'll start talking about something. I'll change the subject if we have to, just so you know that's what I'm going to do. Like, I plan these things ahead of time now that I have more knowledge, and I let them know, like, hey, listen, we're gonna make this as comfortable as possible. And a lot of people you'll see, I think there's one woman I had, she was from the Ukraine. Like 30 minutes in, Tony, she just started bubbling. She got real bubbly and started going, like, she felt real comfortable because she saw it was serious. I wasn't joking. Like, hey, listen, if you're not comfortable, we're not going to talk about certain things. We'll go away from things, and that security, you could see that security as they open up and just start letting things go and start talking, and they loosen up a bit and things like that too. You start learning these things. So like, whenever I get in those subjects, for sure, I'm always like, and then before the episode, it's always a, hey, listen, trigger warning. This is what we're going to be talking about here. If this episode is not for you, respectfully, please do not continue any further. And I tell them in the beginning of it too, the same thing, in case they missed the first trigger. Hey, listen, just, we're about to have a very intense conversation. If this conversation is not for you, me and the guests, that's here with me today, we both respect and understand that. We wish you have a great day, and like, let people know that, hey, heads up, this is going to be a triggering conversation, because some people have those issues they just won't budge on. And I get that. That's cool. That's why I want to let you know that, hey, these are the topic we're talking about today. There's plenty more Pete versus Anxiety. You can go back and see if you haven't heard any of the older stuff, go check on the older stuff. You know what I mean? That way, they're not feeling like they're walking into well, hey, guess what? Peekaboo, here it is, kind of thing like that. So Tony, let's change subjects and let's talk about your book. So tell us all about what the premise of the book is, man. How did you come up with it? I know you're the co-author, so who else is the other author with you?
The other author is Melanie Duckworth.
Okay.
She's at the University of Reno in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
University of Nevada in Reno, and someone that I went to school.
Awesome.
We know each other all that time and have worked together in research and good friends.
Awesome. That's great, though.
We would have these conversations,
yeah.
As we said earlier, you would treat the trauma and it would go away, and then it would come back in another way, in another form. And so we started to analyze when people came back after trauma, treat it, that an incident at the mall, an argument with a partner, an issue with an employer. Why were these mundane, innocuous moments creating a PTSD light up.
Yeah.
What that means is it's like the PTSD comes back,
Right.
with the heart rate pump, the blood pressure pumping, the breathing, and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like something bad just happened. And so we started to pay attention. What are the themes in that argument with the spouse?
Yeah.
And so if the theme is bullying, if the theme is gaslighting,
Yeah.
if the theme is abandonment, if the theme is mistrust,
Yeah.
these are some of the usual major themes. And if those themes are in play, then you have an explanation for why we have what looks like an overreaction to a small event.
Yeah. Exactly.
The theme is not small. You look at the theme, let's say that it's abandonment.
Okay.
Okay. So it happens in the present, and an argument in a couple, and a person feels not heard by their partner. And they panic. Scared, even though it wasn't that big a deal. So we go to the past. What were the experiences with abandonment? Shit, I was abandoned at 2,
Yeah.
and I got adopted. And so that's like a major abandonment for pretty much anyone, that is left for adoption, or you have a parent that disappears after 3 years or 5 years, or it creates a foundation for that abandonment. And then you start to look at, let's say we have a single parent who's trying to manage the kid, and that person is trying to do all they can to survive, and the kid's left alone,
Yeah.
to their own devices.
Yep.
So they feel lonely and left. And then they start to go to the schoolyard, and like no one invites them to play along. They're on the side watching everybody play, and then it starts to go on to, abandonment by peers.
Yeah.
So the guys get together, but they forgot to tell me about this outing. That's not a good moment. Then you have to deal with dating. Then you go on into adulthood. And so we have a track record of many abandonment hits.
All of which I've experienced, Tony, which is it's
Okay.
scary because you can see my reaction. I'm like, you're hitting home with all of those, man.
Okay.
Because I
So
agree.
this little moment now is no more little
Yeah.
because of all the experiences that sensitize a person. You can have 2 persons who have abandonment issues, and it's for different reasons.
Exactly.
All right. So this is another reason to know the story and understand the person better. It's about knowing how this person ticks.
Exactly.
One of the problems in general in the treatment of mental health difficulties, particularly from a psychological perspective, well, even with medication, you give someone depressed, they all get this medication. Are people depressed for the same reasons? How's that medication going to hit all those different reasons? And it's the same thing. It's the same thing psychologically when you're treating someone. So let's say it's depression. If it's depression due to being betrayed by someone,
Mm-hmm.
will that be the same treatment as if the depression is my whole life I've sucked?
No.
There's something wrong with me. Will that be the same treatment as that person is depressed because they're like this far away from being homeless?
No.
And they're just tired of. So they're all depressed, but you can't give them 12 sessions of CBT and 20 sessions of this or that or the other and think this is going to take care of the problem. So this whole book is about essentially customizing, coming up specifically with what the person is affected by.
Yeah.
If you're sensitive to abandonment, so let's say in the example of you were supposed to meet with a good friend and they just don't show, and you wait for an hour wondering what the hell's going on,
Right.
and you get triggered. So the idea here would be to ask, what about this that triggers? And so most people go, I'm just upset that he wasn't there. No,
Mm-mm.
this dude didn't show up, and I felt disrespected. I felt humiliated. I felt not worthy. And this has happened to me many times. So if that's the issue, then the treatment should target those themes.
Yeah.
So if your strategy to being abandoned in the past, every time that has happened, you swallowed it. You didn't say anything. You didn't address it. What are you going to do in this moment?
You're gonna blow.
You're going to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking the reenactment. That's what the book's about.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking the reenactment is to do anything in the present, anything, so long as it's different
Yeah.
than what you've done in the past. If you swallowed, find your voice. Speak up. If you hold it all in, you touched it on earlier, people are better for letting things out,
Mhm.
working it out. processing, because it's not stored in you, becoming toxic and building up to your ears and poison.
Yeah.
So the idea is to identify specifically the theme and then have an intervention that addresses specifically that theme.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, I can relate to the abandonment part of it, the being alone by yourself a little bit, because all things I've dealt with are like that too. I spend a lot of time by myself, so I tend to like to be by myself more often. But I did the same thing where I just kept swallowing it, and then I exploded one time on my partner because just over the stupidest thing, like whatever it was, we had disagreement, and I just magnified it on a higher level because I started getting that sense of it. Went back to that moment of that feeling. I was feeling that moment, but it wasn't that exact moment, or I had this thing where like I try to spearhead it ahead of time. If I feel like in any moment somebody would try to leave, I'm like, I'm going to try and tell you to go before that point. Because if you're not going to abandon me, I'm going to abandon you first, kind of, you know what I mean? That kind of mentality. And it was horrible. It
Yeah.
didn't work,
Yeah.
and obviously
No.
it's the wrong method to use. And I realized that though, during this self-reflection period of these last few months, that was one of the things I was doing that was wrong. I shouldn't do that, and stuff like that, and then get mad over the little things. But it all relates to that issue because it's like you don't realize how much that trauma affects you all your life.
We don't go around looking at events.
Right.
When we look at events, we look at the facts
Mm-hmm.
of the events. I was in a car accident
Mm-hmm.
and it was a frontal.
Mm-hmm.
I broke my leg. I heard a baby in the car. These are just facts.
Yeah.
But what are the themes? The loneliness, the abandonment, no one to help me, no escape. I'm trapped in a car. It reminds me of all the other moments I felt trapped.
Yeah.
And so if the theme of entrapment, which is a big one for a lot of people,
Yeah.
is at play, then we have to figure, how do we get out of the trap?
Yeah.
And one way to get out of the trap, especially particularly if you swallow things in that trap, I think we'll use you as an example.
Okay, go ahead.
If you were left alone quite a bit, who was the sounding board?
Me.
How neutral and accurate was that sounding board?
Probably not even close to you, accurate.
We need people.
Yeah.
We need people to go, dude, what are you doing? You need people like, you're okay. Dude, that's crazy. Don't talk like that again. We need feedback,
Yeah.
And it directs us and it makes us feel a little better, a little more comfortable, more confident about ourselves. And if you're left alone with these,
Mm-hmm.
what are the origins of those thoughts? They go back.
Yeah.
And you can identify, can you think of a few? And you'll go, oh, there was this moment, and
Yeah.
then there was this other moment, and there was this. And this is what
And
we
that's what I was doing in the reenacting in my mind. It's similar to what your book's about, like breaking that pattern, because like I was reflecting on the things I did before and how I can do them differently now and break that pattern of things. Because before it used to be Pete gets upset, starts yelling, screaming, starts doing all these, but Pete I don't want to be that person anymore. So that was one of these things I started doing though, is like, I'd get upset with myself. Like if I did something that was close to that again, because it's like, no, you know better. Don't do that kind of stuff. We got to break this pattern. You can't continue to do it. Because look at what the end result was every time you did it. Like you're not getting anymore. You're upsetting people. You look like uncontrolled. Everybody's gonna say, well, you're always an angry person, and this, all these things people will start associating with you. And then if you start to try and break the pattern of it, like addicts run through this problem a lot of times too. Like they trying to break the cycle of what they used to do, and then people always want to go back to what they did before. You know what I'm saying? It's just like,
but the same thing.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
You have a room of 12 addicts. Are they all addicts for the same reason? So it's the treatment can't just be,
I agree.
With the same thing for everyone. So the thing you should know is, a reenactment is the body, the mind, and behavior way of reacting to a given moment.
Yep.
Okay. And you should know that we all have reenactments, all of us, and we have them every day.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know because we don't go around thinking this way.
Exactly.
We don't go around, we look at events, but we don't go around, and go, oh, man, this is low self-esteem. Oh, this is betrayal. This is, abandonment. This is loss, grief, all these other things, and so this is one reason we don't know what it is. We're not aware what it is. We can't take care of what it is. This problem is the pattern. This is the old habit.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is break these habits with new ways of being. So the first thing is we start with awareness. If you don't know, if you're not aware you're in a moment,
you're
it's
just not helpful. No, I agree.
You're just gonna do what you've always done. Without thought. All right. But if with awareness can come about as a result of meditation, journaling, therapy, going for walks, any creative activity, anything that gets you in tune with you, will increase awareness. And once you have awareness, then you can start problem solving and figure this out, what is going on.
Yeah, no, you're right 100% because that's what I was doing. I started looking at what I was doing and try to be different than what I did before, and you see a different outcome though. It's like, and then you like the outcome. You're like, oh, I like this. This is a better response you're getting, and then people start noticing that too. Like someone had made that mention to me, said that where I was before to where I'm now, they said, man, you've made a major change. I can see a whole difference in you than you were before. And since doing the show, like I sit here and reflect on these things. I journal. I do all those things you just listed. I go for walks. I journal. I do all that kind of stuff, And I meet new people, Tony, all the time that tell me to try different things. In the beginning of season 2 here, where we did a section where I was talking to my inner self. In a gentleman named Julian and I were having a real deep conversation. And this is all everybody can see. What I'm going through. You can see the emotion I'm going through. And like ever since then, I've been using what he's been telling me. Breath work. I use that a lot too. I get overwhelmed. Breath work is amazing, take a deep breath, do the breathing that you were taught how to do. It helps writing it down. Sometimes getting the thoughts out of your head, it's something I do with my anxiety, so I don't get overwhelmed. I was telling somebody about this, I'm a big movie guy. So I recast movies, I start making my mind keep it busy so it doesn't have a chance to overthink things. That way in the moment, I'm thinking of something else. We be having a disagreement. I'm not even thinking about the whole disagreement. I'm just like, okay, well, I'm already over this disagreement already because it's like, I wasn't really going to keep engaging because I'm not really going to keep listening to the negative points of it. My mind's too busy worried about this thing over here, and it helps though. And, people see that you react differently. And it takes time too sometimes. So don't expect people overnight are just going to be like, oh, well, but when people start telling you, hey, listen, I noticed a difference. I noticed a change and you notice you're doing things differently. What are you doing? And it's like, if I told you, you'd probably think I was crazy. Let me list them for you. I journal, I podcast, I do this,
The key thing, there are two kinds of actions or two kinds of non-actions. You can categorize all of behavior according to these two things.
Okay.
You avoid or you approach.
Yeah.
You avoid, not good. Worst thing you could do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what most of us do. Most of us avoid the horror today, but it's there tomorrow. You need to approach.
Yes. 100%.
Work towards, take action. So all the things you describe, talk to people, journal, meditate, those are all actions that you're using to help process and work through this. But most of the world is avoidant.
Yeah.
So all that substance abuse stuff, pick every problem you can think of, it's all avoidance.
Exactly.
All avoidance. And the substance is to escape, and so this is the pattern that a lot of us are in. And until we take responsibility for ourselves and start to take a more active role in action. Too many times people are just good with sitting around and being like the Monday coach, the Sunday quarterback.
The couch potato quarterback, yeah.
Yeah, they're just all talking. But none of them have engaged in the action.
Yeah.
So it's hard to take that seriously. So you could sit in front of a mirror and do affirmations all day long and 1,000 times that day say, I'm a beautiful person.
Yeah.
That's not going to make you beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not going to stay. You have to do, what are the things you can do that make you feel beautiful? Some action.
Right.
Go work out. Go eat better, eat healthier. There are things you could do that could make you feel more beautiful. But it's actions.
It's so
and
true.
actions change how you feel, not the other way around.
The thing I started doing too when I started getting this way was doing the dishes. Okay, so take that example. It's a small, simple thing, and to people, it's they think this is funny. It's I get up and do it. No. I tell myself no, I need to go take care of this because the outcome is that my partner would be happier. And then the small things matter and just start snowballing. You don't have to do anything huge.
Did you do it for her?
I did it for me because it was the fact that I actually committed to doing it and getting it done because I procrastinated. So yeah,
go.
You know what I mean. And it felt good.
But you see how?
Yeah.
You first said it like it was someone else.
No.
But no, you did it for you.
No, exactly.
It's self-care.
Yeah.
It's self-care. We can go further. The more self-care, the more self-love. And so if we can do that and be kind to us, then we can continue to grow.
Exactly.
All right. So I made the correction to sort of emphasize the importance of the self, understanding the need to take care of the self as part of taking the world that way, not the other way around. I'm doing this for my girlfriend, and then she says I'm a good guy, and I'm going to feel like I'm a good guy. It's not going to stick.
No. You got to do it for yourself at the end of the day. Tony's right.
You got to do most things for
Yeah, you
yourself.
got to do it, and that's the way to look at it for me. Is that's what got me motivated to do it. I was like, then I started like it was just the secondhand reaction, like, oh yeah, well hold on. I go in another room and I do the same thing for no, no, no. You need to take your butt back in there and go handle this because you already committed to doing this. You need to take care of it, and you hold yourself accountable too. Like I go to the gym for me. I don't go for anybody else other than Pete. Pete goes for himself. Like I know people with anxiety, like the whole thing of everybody's watching you. I don't even care if everybody's watching me. I'm doing it for me. I don't care what everybody else says. They can sit there and judge what I'm doing all day doing it for me at the end of the day. Like I'm so focused on what I'm doing. I'm doing it for me because it feels good though too, because then you get in those little battles and you start like, oh yeah, this is great and stuff. It was hard. I'm not lying. It was hard. Like it was hard for me because I was a major procrastinator. Now it's like, now I'm just very aware of it. I'm like, oh no, no, listen, you need to go keep your space clean. Even that small thing, I do it for myself because it's like, no, you need to be respectful. You need to do these things. You already said you're committed to doing these. You need to do it. It's not easy. I'll tell people at home it's not easy. Guys, it's not easy to do. I'm not saying you're going to be able to do it overnight, but just that do it for yourself. Like Tony and I were just discussing. Don't do it for anybody else but yourself at the end of the day. Yes, the great thing is that they're happy. You get the response you want, but at the same time, you're doing this for you, that you did it. Okay, well, hey, and then snowball it from there. Do little other things and just, go for a walk, take a walk around the block. You don't realize well, I'm diabetic, for example. Okay, so this will be relatable. So I'm diabetic. Okay. Walking around the block, drinking some water will bring my blood sugar down faster than anything else I can do. And it's all it is. It's just take a quick stroll on the block. Oh, well, Pete, I don't want to listen to nature. Put some headphones on and listen to something and just walk. Before you know it, you've already made the whole path around and you're already there and you're already feeling a lot better. You know what I'm saying? You just accomplished the thing without even realizing you did it. So
I think you need to also remind your listeners they don't have to do what you do or
exactly.
what I
No,
say.
exactly.
Find your medium. What works for you, go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? There isn't one way of doing this.
No, I agree. I usually emphasize that too, that just you have to do what works for you at the end of the day. And it's the same thing with therapy too. Like when I tell people if they consider therapy, make sure you're going for the reason you want to. If you feel like the therapist isn't fitting what you're doing, tell them
Find
that.
someone else. Find someone else. Because it's absolutely important.
It is.
The therapeutic relationship has to be good. Otherwise, you're just not going to see a whole lot of change.
Exactly.
So it's very important. The reaction sometimes to taking care of ourselves and putting our needs first, sometimes the world goes, oh, this is selfish. No.
Ding, 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 Tony. Tell them.
It's not selfish. You're behaving like a parent on a plane. Those oxygen masks drop. You got to put it on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You don't put it on your kid first. You put it on your kid first and you pass out, you're useless. All right? Take care of you and you can take care of everybody else for as long as you can.
I love that analogy,
so
though. That's really
putting
great.
first is because a lot of people are like, just think that it's a bad thing. And sometimes they do so much for the world, not realizing they're just going to get more taken from them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting anything back, And so at least if they start with themselves first, there's a chance that a need can be met.
Exactly. So, Tony, before we start wrapping up, I did want to ask you two questions. I ask all my guests these same questions. So the first one's kind of a fun one. So, Tony, if your mental health had a song, what would you say that would be? See, I love it. Love his reaction alone. Like, everybody loves this question.
I hate to say it, but I'm dating myself. The first thought I had was Whole Lot of Love, Led Zeppelin.
There you go. I love it, Tony. Led Zeppelin. All right. Okay. I got you. All right. So, the second question, the reason I started this whole podcast was that if you could break the stigma about mental health. Now, just kind of like we were talking about setting boundaries where people are like, it's not selfish. You're just setting boundaries yourself. What would you say with one thing that you see in a common basis that you just want people to stop believing? Man, he's in deep thought of this one, guys. I'm telling you, look at him.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick the right one, but this is going to sound a bit strange. Don't listen to the world. The world, pardon my language, is full of shit. All right? Stop living and running your lives according to what the world thinks. The problem is the world is there for itself. It's not there for you. So you have to, again, go back to you. Take care of you, take responsibility, deal with things, but no one's coming to save you.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You have to do it yourself. And even if you have people who care about you and come and save you, you still have to do it yourself eventually because you have to sustain it, because this can't go on forever being rescued by people. So a lot of the trouble that we're in starts off, the world consists of the environment we fall in. And most of us are the product of the goofiness of our parents. All right. And so that's where a lot of this starts early, and and then the world keeps adding to this, and then you make friends and they add to things. And so it's hard to have a strong sense of self and independence.
Yep.
Love your two questions.
I love it, man. I love that answer. That was fantastic. So, Tony, before we start wrapping up, it's a book out right now for everybody to check out? Because
Yep.
I know I'm for sure going to check it out because I'm excited. I love it. I think what you're putting out there, it makes sense. I love it. Guys, go check out the book. It's everywhere you can get your books at now. Tony, do you want to plug the website for them where they can find you at?
Yeah, sure. So TonyIEZZI.com. So that's the website, and you'll find a bunch of information, everything you need there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate you being here today. I absolutely love this conversation. It was great. I appreciate having you take your time to come hang out with us today, man. And guys, with that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. You know where to find me. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to Pandora Radio. And as you always say, that's costs nothing, absolutely to be kind to somebody. One kind act you can do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety saying off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health today?